I got the responses from you on the learning, a learning needs assessment, and based on that, I've developed these learning goals. So after this session, I hope that you have a better understanding of what an NHRI is, its mandate and its central role, a better idea of the role of the Global Alliance for National Human Rights Institutions, as well as the Subcommittee on Accreditation, different perspectives on how to deal with the dilemma of independence, legitimacy and credibility, and an idea of the methods and results of the work of the Danish Institute for Human Rights, which quite a few of you expressed that you'd like to hear more about. I don't have any visit cards. I think it's becoming a little bit old-fashioned to bring visit cards these days, but the PowerPoint is on the website, or will be on the website, and you can click on this link. It will bring you to the website of the Danish institution, where you can see my contact details and the details of the organization at large. So you're very welcome to contact me and get back. I'd like to just introduce the Danish institution initially. We are about 140 staff members. And we have a national division which focuses on our working in the national context. So this is the national mandate of the institute, and we have an international division which focuses on supporting national human rights institutions as well as other state actors internationally. We're an independent public institution. As a national institution, we're based on an act approved by Parliament from 2012, and this act is based on the Paris Principles. I think when I read the Act again and looked at the papers, the Paris Principles are mentioned twice in the Act and 56 times in the commentaries to the Act, which shows the importance of the Paris Principles as the framework for the work of NHRIs. So if you want to understand what NHRIs are supposed to work with and the mandate of NHRIs, you should read the Paris Principles. I'll talk more about those later. According to the mandate, we are focusing on all of these areas, and I just want to bring your attention to this area, because that's what unique about the Danish institution, that we also, it's mentioned in our law that we contribute to the implementation of human rights nationally and abroad. And that's due to our history as an institution. We did that from the very beginning before we became a fully fledged NHRI, according to the Paris Principles. So we have continued this work, supporting and partnering with sister organizations around the world, as well as state institutions such as ministries of justices and security sector and so forth, and civil society as well. So as far as I know, we're the only one with that particular mandate founded in our law. Human rights is primarily involves the relationship between individuals and the state. So the practical task of protecting and promoting human rights is always one of the state. But due to problems of effective implementation at the national level, the so-called compliance gap, the effective enjoyment of human rights requires the existence of an effective national infrastructure for their protection. And this infrastructure is not composed of NHRIs, of course, alone. This is our image of the human rights protection system, where you see the NHRI in the middle, and then you have courts, governments, parliaments, academia, business, and civil society. And if this was not our own image, we use this internally mainly. You could have other oversight institutions in here as well. So it is a system of human rights protection where we consider the NHRI to be the lighthouse who monitors the work of all of the other actors. But the main responsibility lies with the state. A definition of a human rights institution, found this in OHR, is that it can be described in broad terms as an independent body established by a national government for the specific purpose of protecting and promoting human rights at the domestic level. As the Danish Institute, there are state bodies. There are administrative state bodies with a constitutional or legislative mandate to protect and promote human rights. So they are different from civil society. We work very much through the state. We are, in Denmark, we have, for instance, Amnesty International, and we collaborate with them on various issues. But they have one role, where they are voicing what we might both consider human rights problems and violations. They do it through their organs, media, engagement in civil society. They have a more, let's say, activist approach. We quite often work through the ministries. So we establish a relationship with the ministries, and we try to influence from within. This also means that we are very often invited inside the ministries to be part of various working groups. Very often it happens under the radar. When, for instance, new laws are being developed, we are being asked to provide advice and input to new laws to ensure compliance with human rights before they are passed. The government doesn't like to be very vocal about this. So it's important that we keep a low profile. It's not to be, you can't see it from our status report. I brought some English versions here of our annual report, because it's that's where we are different from CSOs. So sometimes it may seem, or it may be invisible, quite a bit of what we do, and it can be frustrating for staff members that what they do is invisible. The direct, when we're working directly with government, but that's the relationship, and that's what makes it possible, I think, for government to include us to the extent they do in their work. We also publish a number of social-legal studies. We carry social-legal studies out, and those, obviously, we publish broadly and use the press to promote. So we are also very vocal. But then it's based on a legal analysis, a social legal analysis of the human rights area we're looking at. So that was a little bit on the state body. There are, generally speaking, 3 types of NHRIs: national commissions and institutions such as us, as well as the Afghan Commission. There's ombudsman type of institutions, especially in South America and in Eastern Europe. They perform the role of an NHRI when they have a broad human rights mandate, not when they're solely or primarily focused on administrative issues. Then they're not considered to be an NHRI. And then there are other types of NHRIs that are mainly research institutions, such as the Swiss one that's coming up, it seems, will be one of these institutions. We'll see to what extent it's accredited, when it's, at what level it'll be accredited. There's quite a steep development. You can see acceleration of NHRIs. In 1999, there were 8, including the Danish one. This was really before the Paris Principles were enacted. So they were not called NHRIs at the time, but they had a function that qualifies to call them that. So 8 NHRIs in 2002, 55, 2014, 103, and 2017, 116 NHRIs. And the core mandate of an NHRI is defined by what I said before, the Paris Principles. The Paris Principles are adopted by the UN General Assembly, and they consist of a set of minimum requirements for the function and status of human rights institutions. So compared to the corruption commissions, or the anti-corruption commissions, where we discussed yesterday that they have, what was it again? They had their statute was based on a workshop or a seminar from, where was it from? In the Jakarta Declaration, yeah. I think that what is the strength of NHRI structurally is that we are part of the formal UN system. We are, the NHRIs are endorsed by, and it's based on a resolution, and we're part of the UN structure in the sense that we have, if the NHRI is accredited, it is invited into the Human Rights Council to provide alternative views to the state reports with regard to both treaty body reportings and UPR, and they're also invited to speak when special rapporteurs report on a specific country. And increasingly, they have participation rights at the General Assembly level in New York. So they are, by the UN, they are considered to be the link between the international system, protection system, and the national protection system, anchored in the Paris Principle. The Paris Principles are from, they're based on an international workshop which was organized by the Human Rights Committee in '91, and then it was adopted in '92 at the UN Commission, and then endorsed in '93 by the General Assembly. And I think it's interesting when you look at the history of NHRIs. The first time it was mentioned in the UN, it was in '46. Already there, it was states were aware that there was a need to have a body nationally who could act as an intermediary between the international legal framework which was being developed and domestication of the laws. And I read when I was coming here, I got interested in more details with regard to this, to the historical background. And initially, it was mentioned in the resolutions of the Human Rights Committee, which the Human Rights Council was called at the time, the current Human Rights Council. It was mentioned that we need some kind of information body. Then, some years afterwards, it was mentioned, maybe this, and another resolution, this information body should have monitoring competences. And then a couple of years after, it was said they should have monitoring competences, and then they should be independent from the state. And little by little, you saw in the resolutions that were passed that the idea of what is an NHRI actually, and what kind of mandate should they carry, became more and more clear. And from any kind of NGO, or and also even the UN information offices were considered NHRIs in the beginning. It became the mandate became more and more specific. So from a donor perspective, or a perspective from anyone, actually an actor working with NHRIs, the criteria by which you can evaluate it is to look at to what extent does this NHRI, is it structured in accordance with the Paris Principles, and does it actually perform the mandates? So one can say that an NHRI should have a broad human rights mandate to protect and promote human rights. This means all human rights and not just some, such as you can have Dalit commissions. You have, for instance, in Nepal, you have a Dalit commission. There you also have a women's commission. So if you only have a specific mandate, human rights focus, then you're not considered to be an NHRI. The broadness of the human rights focus is important in this regard. You should not be limited to rights in a national constitution, obviously, but also rights in the ratified instruments at the international level. And then it should be possible for an NHRI to deal with international human rights system, but the domestic dimension is really the key requirement. Independence and free from government interference. That's a criteria which is also being considered always when NHRIs are accredited by the global structure. So it should be established by law, and if it's, for instance, established on the basis of a presidential decree, it's not considered to be that's always commented upon and critiqued by the subcommittee, because obviously it's more difficult for the NHRI to act independently if it's based on a presidential decree. It should have institutional independence and personal independence in terms of selection procedures and how commissioners are elected, and to what extent executive directors and staff in general and board members, to what extent they have diplomatic status, so they cannot be prosecuted for their criticism of human rights in a country. Then they should have financial independence. The state should provide adequate funding, and it should be able to attract its own funding without approval and autonomy over the use of funds. When we were working at the Institute with capacity development of the Zimbabwean NHRI, from the point of when the law was passed and there was a secretary in place, to 4 years afterwards when there were a secretary with, I think, 80 staff members working, as far as I remember. And they were under the Ministry of Justice, and their funds was given on the Ministry of Justice's budget, who then allocated funds to the NHRI upon request, which was really, not an example of having financial independence. And it was highly problematic for the NHRI to get their salaries for the staff, and they had to, they still actually, when they issue reports to Parliament, they have to be approved by the Ministry of Justice before they go to Parliament. This means that they issue very few reports to Parliament, but they publish them instead on their website and share them with civil society. I mean, they can still work and do good human rights monitoring. They just don't use the state structures because they are being, they're not paralyzed, but they are being scrutinized by the state. And then there's the issue of pluralism, that there should be pluralist representation in the governance structures, which means that the commissioners, for instance, since the Afghan Commission has commissioners, you can tell more about that, but they have to represent among them especially the groups in the country who risks human rights violations, to be victims of human rights violation the most. It can be certain ethnic groups, people with disabilities. Typically, you have a women commissioner, and it really depends on the country. But it should be pluralist. So, with regard to the mandates and the of an NHRI, as I said initially, an NHRI should work with the promotion and protection of human rights. So these are protection areas. You can say, so all NHRI should work with monitoring and monitor any situation of violation of human rights which it decides to take up. Another key mandate is advising the government and the parliament and any other body on specific violations and as well as on development of laws and policies, as I mentioned previously. This is what we do. This is an important part of our work. And then we contribute to the reporting at the international level. As I think many of you will know, we develop parallel reports to the government report when governments are reporting on their treaty obligations, as well as in UPR processes. That is also a key mandate to educate on education of human rights and inform about human rights, especially in this global situation we have today. The importance of ensuring that all people know their human rights and understand the importance of human rights is crucial. And then some NHRIs have quasi-judicial competences, and they handle complaints, and they can also they have the mandate to hear and consider individual complaints, and they can bring certain cases of particular importance to the court. I will shift a couple of things here, or skip a couple of slides, because I want to, before I think we start our panel debate, I just wanted to bring your attention to the global structure, because NHRIs are part of a global structure of national alliances. It's called GANRI, and you have the link there. It's created by NHRIs and supported by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights to promote the establishment and strengthening of NHRIs, and it has a secretariat in Geneva, where anyone can ask about information, can ask about a particular specific NHRI in their country. You can ask about the results of the Subcommittee on Accreditation, which is our body. It's in the Global Alliance in GANRI, which accredits NHRIs either with an A or a B accreditation. GANRI is headed by a chairperson. It's run by a bureau comprising of 16 NHRIs, and it's composed of 4 regional groups in Africa, Europe, the Americas, and Asia Pacific. And 3 of those has a secretariat with resources also to assist and help anyone who would like to know more about how to cooperate with an NHRI or specific questions on the NHRI. There are currently 78 A status NHRIs and 33 B status NHRIs. They have observer status, where there's this, when you have an A status NHRI, you're a voting member in the governance structure in the bureau, and you also have participation rights in both the Human Rights Council in Geneva and increasingly, as I said, in New York. The Subcommittee on Accreditation, this is the body in terms of, this is the body which accredits, as I said, NHRIs, but it's also a body which is supported by the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, and it's a body that, as a donor or as a partner, you can approach if you have concerns about the work of an NHRI, and you have concerns about their status, for instance, as an A accredited institution. So anyone can provide information to the committee, and civil society organizations do that often. And in the recent accreditation process from March 2017, the Azerbaijan NHRI, for instance, was downgraded to a B status NHRI based on the input of the civil society organizations in Azerbaijan. But they also hear any other actor, international and national, who have information about the NHRI, which they would like to voice. So all of this information is gathered and brought to the attention of the committee, and then on the basis of that, they assess the accreditation of the NHRI. So that is our accountability system. And you can read much more about that on the website. So I will not get into our various results and or our methods of working. As an institute, we are not a donor. We're funded by donors to partner with NHRIs and support them. I think that's an important point. But if you would like to hear more, you can always grab a hold of me in the break, or you can check the website and the link to the Danish